It's a hymnal. Did you know that gives you some idea of how important music was to our pioneers. The first pamphlet of any size that James White brought out, hymnal. First hardbound book that our pioneers, this 1852 hymnal. And going on from there, while we're just doing this, let's just show you some of these. Here's the 1855 hymnal. Now this hymnal, you can see it's larger, and some, not all, but some of the hymns in here actually have the music, so that you could follow along. And then this is the 1861 hymnal. So this is the hymnal that you would have been singing from at the time the church was organized 150 years ago in 1863. And then in addition to that, there's a very rare little hymnal that James White's sister, Anna White, compiled in 1854, I think it was, or 4, called Hymns for Youth and Children. So this was the first hymnal for young people to use, hymns for youth and children. So now you've seen all the hymnals, not quite all the supplements. James White would bring out supplements. This one, this 1855 hymnal, has the supplement, and then he found a few more hymns that he wanted, and so this one also has the addition to the supplement in the back of it. So he had the hymnal, the supplement, and the addition to the supplement. And when he would go around traveling among the churches and would hear a song that people seemed to like, why he would put them in the hymnals. Or if he was going to bring out a new hymnal, he would say, send in your hymns, original or select. Original meaning is so good that the church can't do without it. You know, you wrote it, original. Or select, you selected it from somewhere else, and it's so good, you can't do without it. I think that number 31 is one of those, well, it came out in our first hymnal, but it's one of those that James White would have found somewhere. What Heavenly Music? And I think a lot of you probably know it because it is sung in a number of churches now that they've put it back in our current hymnal. His spirit's up. Oh, this said he, the blessed hope. He was a generation older, born in 1792. Came out, of course, not until 1821. Now I'm 27, so he would be the patriarch of the group. The next one, and one I saw with sword and shield, who boldly braved the world's cold crown and fought unyielding on the field to win an everlasting crown, etc. Well, who should we probably talk about there? The tradition is James White. He was the leader. He was the one that people followed. I shouldn't pause and ask you this, but because I don't have this picture here, but I'm just wondering, have you girls ever thought, what in the world did Ellen White see in this guy? Have you looked at his picture? Why does he want to marry him? How do you think about the pioneers in that kind of a human? What did he see in her? I mean, she behind these people. Anyway, so the second stanza is thought about James' wife. Now what about the third stanza? And there was one who left behind the cherished friends of early years, and honor, pleasure, wealth resigned, to tread the path bedewed with tears. Well, some people have said, obviously, she's thinking about Jane Andrews. Well, maybe she was, as we talked about this morning. Maybe Annie was thinking about Jane Andrews. But not here in 1852, writing about, he hadn't gone anywhere yet, so this doesn't really fit. He doesn't become a missionary until 1874. So someone suggested, what about Uriah, her brother? Maybe it's Uriah. He's given up this educational career and all that kind of thing. Well, not really. This was written in early 1852. Uriah hadn't even accepted the Sabbath. He doesn't accept that until late in 1852 at a meeting here in this church. So he hasn't given up anything yet. So who's she talking about in that stanza? Well, if you remember the distance between the Leonard Hastings people over there in New Ipswich and the Smith family, those were the closest Sabbath-keeping neighbors to each other. There is a tradition that came down in the Leonard Hastings family that Annie was actually thinking about herself. But no self-respecting woman would have been so brazen at the time to make that obvious. So she clothed it in masculine pronouns. But if you read it, she has at this point become a Sabbath keeper. She has given up what she thinks is going to be a promising career. And she could well have been thinking about herself. That is the tradition that has come down in the Leonard Hastings family. And the last stanza is about all of us, so that's what we're going to do. While pilgrims here, we journey on. Number 21, stanza 4.
Progress.
All right, so we need to move a little bit. So let's do the last stanza. We're talking about eternity anyway. And so we'll try to help the southern students. The rest of you from the north, you help them. We'll see if we can make this work a little bit faster, okay? Oh, brother, be faithful, eternity here shall tell for thy faithfulness now. When Christ smiles the land that shall stand more because I know you folks have to leave and I want to talk a little about the building, the church. So, 2 more songs. Rush off, yeah, you're just getting them warmed up here. I'd like to sing for another half an hour, but I know they have a banquet coming, so. Anyway, let's go to number 42. In the early days of this church, we were a temperance movement. So we need to do at least one temperance song. So, we're going to do this. Now, if you've never heard this song, let me show you where it came from. So you won't, you can't deny this is part of your Adventist heritage, all right? This is Temperance and Gospel Songs compiled by J.E. White. Who's J.E. White?
James Edson White.
Son number 2 of James Allen White. You know him best for the Morning Star. That's a few years later. But he compiled this book, Hymns for Temperance. It's Temperance and Gospel Songs for use at temperance clubs and gospel temperance meetings of the American Health and Temperance Association. Who was the president of that? Dr. John Harvey Kellogg. All right, John Harvey Kellogg. So this is about as Adventist as you can get. This smoking and chewing song. Now, let me just say 2 things. One, it was never reprinted. I can't find it in any other Adventist anywhere else. And number two, in all seriousness, I think it's fun to laugh and chuckle with the pioneers, but I would never want to laugh at the pioneers. They were facing a very serious situation. You kids from the South, the ones that actually come from the South, you may still remember, or maybe they don't do it much down anymore, but chewing tobacco spit every which way. That was something real. Smoke, there was no non-smoking coaches on the trains or rooms in the train stations. In fact, here is what a lady wrote after she went across the country in 1871. This was published. So the transcontinental train opened in 1869, somewhere between then and 1871 when this was published. Here's what she wrote about going across country on the new transcontinental train. Just a few excerpts. She says, the men chew and spit. This is chewing tobacco, of course. They chew and spit. They read and spit. They talk and spit. They laugh and spit. They breathe and spit. And some swear and spit. By lamplight as by daylight, the process went on. And what a scene did the flickering lights dimly disclose. Men, shaken equally out of their starch, out of their dignity, tumbling and rolling every way, some from their horizontal positions, spitting now more directly upon their neighbors. Women cuddled up on the seats, evidently ill at ease, and starting even in their slumbers, as well they might amid these threatening showers. So when they sang smoking and chewing, they were relating this, they was relating to something that was very real in their existence or life at that time. So let's do a stanza, at least one stanza of smoking and chewing. Not too fast? Well, I'm going to avoid chewing and the spitting and all that. All right. Chewing in the parlor, smoking in the street, choking with the dark smoke everybody meet, spitting on the pavement, spitting on the floor. Is there such enslavement few years ago, I was leading a New England tour, and there were 2 buses. And the conference, it was a conference, I won't say which conference, but the president asked a couple of us to lead, and one of them was my former church history teacher. And I usually do songs when I get to Washington, New Hampshire, and I thought, do I have a nerve with my professor, former professor, to sing this song? And I did, and I didn't know how moved he was, but a short time later, he sent me a new stanza. There it is. So, let's do this last one. Smoking marijuana. So you can update these whole songs, okay? Smoking marijuana, getting on the race, using burning needles, risking death with age, dodging eyes and bullets, dropping out of school, facing time in prison, why be such a fool? Chewing, smoking, spitting, choking, sending clouds of whirling everybody's face, chewing in the parlor, spitting on the floor. Is there such enslavement? Is there such a bore? Now I can't end on that one, so we're going to do one more song. We're going to end with number 35. Couple with his life. Written by Frank Belden. Who was Frank Belden? He was the nephew of Ellen White. Ellen White's older sister, Sarah, married Belden, Stephen Belden, and had a couple of kids, 2 or 3. One of them was Frank, the hymn writer. If you know anything about Frank Belden's career, he was extremely talented. In fact, his daughter, Lindy Belden, left a letter, she's dead also now, but she wrote a letter that there's copies of around, where she describes, just gives some idea of the talent of her father. She would describe how her father would go to a meeting, would sit in the back of the tent or the church, wherever the meeting was being held, would sit there until the minister stood up to begin to preach. And when the pastor stood up and announced the text from which he was going to be speaking that day, then Frank Belden would slip out quietly and write a hymn based on the text that was being preached about right then. Seriously, by the time the sermon is over, he has completed a new hymn, words and music. His wife, according to their daughter, his wife was also a musician. The 2 of them would stand up and sing a duet at the close of the meeting, a brand new hymn on the same topic of the text that the preacher had been preaching on. Talk about talent. Well, how long did they preach in those days? An hour and a half or so. So we had a little longer than a 20-minute homily, but even so, I could take a year and a half and I couldn't write a hymn. So, I mean, this guy has talent. He also compiled several of our early hymnals. Maybe the most beloved hymnal this church ever used, the Sabbath School hymnal, Christ in Song, was compiled by Frank Belden. So we're going to sing slowly this time. But let's sing all 4 stanzas and cover with his life. So softly and slowly, because I hope you're thinking and praying about your own experience as you sing the words of this song, and think about Frank and the fact that he's an officer at the review and all kinds of things, but inside what's happening.
Look upon Jesus,
here so the tempo can change. See, I'm not a musician, so I can follow the words. So let's sing this with a little more enthusiasm. In fact, why don't we stand? Longing the joy. We have the reflective part. Let's sing the other part now. Longing the joy, pardon to know, Jesus will come, light is known. Lord, I accept it, leaving my home. Gladly I wear like your wrath, covered with His light, whiter than snow. Fullness of His life, and shall I know. My life of scarlet, my sin and woe, covered with His light, whiter than snow. Records of mine, death for my sin, justice for mine, like pure and clean, sanctified by obeying His word. Lord, my Redeemer and my Lord, covered with His light, whiter than snow. Fullness of His light, then shall I know. My life of scarlet, my sin and woe, covered with His light, whiter than snow. Let's bow our heads. Our Father in heaven, as we have been challenged by the words and the thoughts behind the words of this old hymn, may we, in our own lives, each and every one of us individually, answer the question whether we have truly accepted Christ's robe of righteousness in our own life. Are we really allowing Jesus to cover our sins, to transform our lives, to reform us, to be fit citizens for heaven? Lord, that's what we want, and we pray that we will have that experience. In Christ's name I ask. Amen.
Oh, brother, be faithful, the promise is sure, that waits for the faithful and tried, to reign with the ransom immortal and pure, and ever with Jesus abide.